This is the Cool Meanderings with Dr. Germ G podcast. Thanks for listening. Welcome back to Cool Meanderings with Dr. Germ G. I'm your host, Dr. Germ G, an aspiring writer, a lover of sports, culture, entertainment, and education too. I have a little bit of an education background, but today I want to talk sports, specifically football, college football. Man, yesterday was absolutely upset Saturday. You had all kinds of crazy games, unexpected defeats, and on a day that on paper looked to be mundane. You looked at the schedule and you thought, well, seems to be lots of sure wins, but the day was anything but sure. So, after smashing Georgia last week, the newly ranked number 1 Alabama Crimson Tide went on the road to Nashville to face off against the 22.5 underdog Vanderbilt Commodores, who were 0-60 against number 1 teams. Well, now you could make it 1-60 as they upset the Alabama Crimson Tide 40-35. Now, this was the first time they beat Bama since 1984. And, I think what's interesting about this game, to me anyway, was that it didn't seem close. It looked as if Vandy was one step ahead of Bama for most of the game, which is something I had never seen in the Bama-Vandy game before. I mean, it just looked as if Bama could not stop Vandy's offense, which was amazing to see. Now, Alabama wasn't alone on upset Saturday in the SEC, because you also had number 4 Tennessee, who lost a close one at unranked Arkansas 19-14. Now, in this game, the Vols, they looked like they were in control for a good chunk of the game until about late in the third quarter, where the offense began to unravel a little bit, and Arkansas, they changed a few things, and the Razorbacks, they pulled it out. So, I think this particular game, it said more about the Arkansas Razorbacks and their ability to adjust, and about the SEC overall as a tough conference than it did about the Tennessee Vols. Tennessee's a pretty good team. I mean, they're a legit team. This was a tough one. This was a tough game, and I think it just reminds you that the SEC generally is just a tough conference. Just look at the Missouri Texas A&M game from earlier in the day. So you had the number 9 ranked Missouri Tigers, who went to College Station. They got whipped. They got whipped by the number 25 Texas A&M Aggies 41-10. The same Aggies that looked average against Notre Dame earlier in the season. And quite frankly, I don't think they were that impressive in their win against Arkansas last week, or any of their games really. This was a game where they just manhandled Missouri, who I think was fairly ranked at number 9, but man, this game was so one-sided. And that's the thing, the SEC is just a super stacked conference. They were always stacked. Now they're just over the top stacked, especially now that Oklahoma and Texas are in the conference. So I would say there's a pretty good chance that no team is going to run the table in this conference, because you still have Texas still has to play Oklahoma next week, and then they play Georgia not too long after that. So I think chances for an L, as in L for Longhorns, I think the chances of an L for the Longhorns in the next couple of weeks are 50-50. Given what we saw today, or yesterday, it's early Sunday now, but given what we saw yesterday, I think there's a 50-50 chance that the Longhorns take that L in the next couple of weeks. And if they make it through, then there's still the SEC championship game, as we all know, is another opportunity for an L, because we're finding out that this conference is just loaded from top to bottom. From top to bottom. I mean, Vandy is the perennial bottom feeder. I mean, they own the bottom of the conference, and they just beat Bama, and not like squeak by. I mean, they beat Bama with a capital B. So, I mean, they made Bama look ordinary. So, and that's the worst team, arguably on paper, in the SEC. Anyway, so just, some food for thought on the SEC. They are a legit monster conference. So is the Big Ten. Man, the Big Ten is this is another interesting conference. After getting dog walked by Rutgers last week, I mean, just manhandled by the Rutgers Scarlet Knights, the unranked Washington Huskies bounced back. They bounced back nicely by humbling the number 10 ranked Michigan Wolverines 27-17. Now, it's amazing to think that this was a national championship game last year, because these teams are obviously not the same. I mean, they're both just so different this season. I mean, Michigan hasn't really looked like a top 10 team. Even with that win over USC, the Wolverines they look diminished. And in this particular game, they looked feeble, particularly at the quarterback position. So, backup QB Jack Tuttle literally handed the Huskies the game in the fourth quarter with 2 turnovers. First, a needless fumble, then a really bad interception that just, I thought, okay, you could clearly see that this was a poorly timed throw, but give the kid a break. He's a backup quarterback. But he's in there because the starting QB, Alex Orji, was just ineffective. And this guy, Orji, was ineffective last week in their win over Minnesota, in my opinion. And quite frankly, I think in general the Wolverines just have a QB problem. Whatever former coach Jim Harbaugh was doing last year with J.J. McCarthy, who went on to get drafted by the Minnesota Vikings in the first round in this last year's NFL draft. Whatever they were doing last year in the quarterback room seemed to stop with McCarthy, because what they have now just isn't working. I mean, even with, again, that win against USC, you go look at the production of the quarterback, and you see that this is not a top 10 team. I mean, they're barely a ranked team, quite frankly. And yeah, it showed today. It showed in the game against Washington. It just, the offense is just feeble. I think they're a bowl team, but not a playoff team. The same for Washington, who really should have lost this one. So these are 2 former playoff teams that have come back. They've fallen back to the pack big time. Now, a game that I thought was hard fought to the end was in Minneapolis between the desperate 2-3 Minnesota Gophers and the number 11 USC Trojans. There was a lot of hard hitting in that game. And the Gophers, they showed some toughness in coming back in this one. They were down 17-10, and they outscored the Trojans 14-0 in the fourth quarter to take this one 24-17. But it was the way they did it. They just methodically moved the chains, and they had a nice mix of tough runs on the ground and throws in open areas of the Trojans' D. It looked like they just out-muscled the Trojans on both sides of the ball, which is huge for their coach, PJ Fleck. I mean, this is a game that could potentially salvage their season, although the schedule looks tough. I mean, they go out to UCLA, then they play Maryland, then they're at Illinois, at Rutgers, then they host Penn State, and then they finish up at Wisconsin. So I mean, this could be a turning point for the Gophers. I mean, there's some tough games ahead. They're going to need that toughness, starting next week against UCLA, who, by the way, in my opinion, is, I think, a really tough 1-4 team. Now, they got beat pretty bad by number 7 Penn State yesterday, but I mean, UCLA, they've had some tough games, and they went to Baton Rouge and played the LSU Tigers. I mean, they're not playing cupcakes. They're playing some real squads. So you gotta. The conference. Not to mention, look, UCLA is obviously in a top-heavy conference, but they didn't have to play LSU. They did both UCLA and USC. So give them credit. But I think Minnesota is going to have its hands full. But that gives you an idea of just how deep the new Big Ten is. I mean, last week, USC, they beat up on Wisconsin in the second half, who then proceeded to come back and beat the daylights out of Purdue this week. I think it was 52-6. While USC gets run over by a Minnesota team that is borderline. I mean, they're 3-3 and could go either way. They could end up being bowl eligible or drop to 4-6, 3-7, given the schedule. So it just shows you how difficult. I don't think Minnesota will do that though. I think Minnesota will probably end up 500. I mean, the way these games played out tells me that there are going to be a lot of upsets, a lot of surprising defeats. These are tough teams, and you don't win games on paper. You got to actually go out there and do it. So I think there's a lot of football left to be played in the Big Ten. On paper, most assume that Ohio State is the likely winner of the conference. I mean, they look tough. I mean, they manhandled Iowa today pretty easily, but I don't know. They still need to play at Oregon and at Penn State. So, I would say, and then they also have to play an underrated Indiana team that's quietly undefeated. So, there's a lot of football left in the Big Ten. Now, I do think that Ohio State is probably going to beat Oregon. I just can't see how Oregon matches up well with a bigger Ohio State squad. I don't know if they're faster. They're probably both, quick at the key positions. But Ohio State they just look so much bigger. I don't know. It'll be interesting, especially given the Oregon quarterback, Gabriel. He's a little guy. I just want to see how this plays out. This will be interesting because, OSU. They just look on the screen. They just look like NFL draftees, or across the board. So that'll be a fun game. I like OSU to win that one by 2 touchdowns, but I do think that they may have trouble at Penn State in a couple of weeks, and perhaps against Indiana. And if they somehow make it out of the conference, then I think it'll be fun to see them against some of these other teams in the playoff. I really don't see anyone running the table, but it'll be interesting. And then you have the ACC and the Big 12. I think they're going to have also a lot to say about what happens in January. The ACC also has some heavy hitters. Look, the Cal Bears. Kudos to the Cal Bears. They almost pulled off the upset. The unranked Cal Bears. They had the number 8 Hurricanes on the ropes in the second half, 35-10. But somehow the Hurricanes, they found a way to escape, 39-38. I thought with the combination of great plays, a little bit of luck, and a little charity from the referees for the second week in a row, because they probably should have lost last week to Virginia Tech, but the refs made a controversial call in the end zone on a 50-50 ball that probably should have gone to the Hokies, but they ruled in favor of the Hurricanes, and so hence they remain undefeated. And today I thought there was a crucial targeting call at the end of the game that probably would have swung as Miami was trying to make a comeback. I think had they ruled in favor of targeting against the Hurricanes, maybe the Bears win this one, but alas, hey, sometimes, it's better to be lucky than good, right? But the Cal Bears, man, they're 3-2. I thought they're very impressive on defense. They're quick. They're a fast squad. They went down to Auburn earlier this season and they took it to the Auburn Tigers in Auburn. And, I think it says a lot about the Cal Bears, the California Bears, and really the ACC and college football at large. There are lots of competitive teams out there. I think, hey, look, so you've got Miami. To me, I think Miami is definitely a team that is going to have a loss in the near future. I mean, they've come so close to losing twice. I would say that Miami losing is inevitable. You can lock that one up. They have a loss coming. They're not going to finish the season undefeated. I don't think so. Now, I do think that they will ultimately meet the Clemson Tigers in the ACC title game. Clemson, they're doing their thing after getting beat up, by the Georgia Bulldogs in week 1, 34-3. They're just quietly winning their games. They had a pretty decent showing today. They beat the Florida State Seminoles 29-13, which isn't that big of a deal anymore because Florida State has collapsed. But still, the Tigers are winning. They're right there. They went into the game ranked 15. My guess is that they'll move up to 11 or 12. So they're in the mix. And then you got the Big 12. In the Big 12, you've got teams like the BYU Cougars that are undefeated. Yeah, Iowa State looks pretty good. And then there's the Colorado Buffaloes at 4-1, who are probably not as good as their record says. But still, I mean, they're an interesting team with head coach Deion Sanders. My guess is that at the end of the season, maybe you have BYU and a Kansas State have a rematch, or that BYU-Utah game will be very interesting too. The Utah Utes are always a tough go. So I don't know. I think the bigger picture here is that I may have been wrong about the new 12-team college football playoff format. One of my previous episodes, I was a little bit dismissive of this new wrinkle in college football and sort of thought, well, at the end of the day, it's going to be the same old. It's just, there's always a handful of teams that always seem to rise to the top. But I don't know, this season so far, it feels different. It feels like it's anybody's championship to win. I mean, there's no clear dominant number one team. I mean, we thought it might have been Georgia, maybe Alabama, but not anymore. I mean, Ohio State is a paper tiger until proven otherwise. Ohio State, I think, they haven't really played anybody yet. So we'll see. We'll find out about Ohio State in a couple of weeks. Texas is in the SEC, so it's understandable that they might drop a game or two. So yeah, I really don't see anyone running the table, with the exception of maybe Ohio State, but who knows? I mean, I don't think Oregon can beat them, but Penn State might. And that's the thing, it's that kind of season where you really have teams that are in parity. I mean, it's anyone's to win. There are literally 10 to 15 teams that if you put them in a tournament, they all have a legitimate chance. So this should be fun. I mean, perhaps we're going to be very entertained in the next couple of weeks leading up to this new playoff in January. Yeah, we'll have quite a few one-loss teams and maybe a few two-loss teams in the mix. So yeah, that'll be fun. I'm in now. I wasn't sold, but I'm in now. After seeing the games yesterday and a few games, I think after yesterday, okay, some of the earlier matchups that were a little shocking now seem to have more relevance. It's just the idea that there's a lot of parity in college football this year, a lot more parity than we think, and that just about any team can, look, if Vanderbilt can do that to Bama, Minnesota can do that to USC, man, the teams have a shot. They have a shot. They do. They have a shot. It's wide open. So that'll be fun to see. I'm also a little excited for my New York Mets. I grew up as a Mets fan, so I'm excited to see the Mets back in the playoffs. They took care of business yesterday against the Philadelphia Phillies, winning 6-2. Now I think they've got game 2 later on today, so I don't know. Yeah, I think I'll temper my excitement until we get to the league championship series. If the Mets are there, hey man, let's go. But yeah, so I just wanted to use this episode to drop a few thoughts about college football yesterday. I didn't anticipate it being this exciting. But after yesterday's results, I think you have to take a fresh look at college football and all the possibilities that lie ahead. If what happened, man, anything is possible. I mean, again, Vandy didn't just beat Alabama. I don't want to say dominated Alabama, but they were comfortably ahead. The score, to me, is not indicative of how the game looked. They just looked a step ahead, which is amazing. It truly is. So that's the kind of season we have. So I'm excited to see what's next. What did you think of yesterday's college football slate? Are you excited? Are you looking forward to the next couple of weeks? Who's your team? Drop me a line at drgermg@coolmeanderings.com. You can also find me on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon Music. Yeah, I'm out here. Definitely. And I appreciate your listening ears and your support. And until the next one, have a great one. This is the Cool Meanderings podcast with Dr. Germ G.